When I was little, I believed that magic was real. Here are two pictures of me from my childhood. I believed everything was possible. I had so many dreams. I wanted to live on the moon like a little prince in a little cozy house and gaze down on this cute little world. And I really believed that was possible. And when I looked at the stars at night, I was waiting for a miracle that would make it possible. Now, I would like to tell you about a miracle that happened in my life, but not the one I ever expected. It all started when I was 12 years old. One day, I was in school playing basketball. I started running towards the net, and suddenly everything went black. My heart started to beat 250 beats per second, and to my shock, I fell down on the court. Later, I found out that if my heart rate hadn't slowed down, within a few minutes, I would have died. And for 6 years, that same thing would happen to me at least twice per week, until finally the condition I had, supraventricular tachycardia, was operated on. During this time, at the age of 16, I began to have the first symptoms of a rare bladder disease. I was in such extreme pain that I was admitted to the hospital on a monthly basis, and the doctors weren't able to diagnose the disease. They told me, "We've tested everything, and the results all came back negative. The pain must only be in your mind." And since I wasn't quite sure what to believe, without telling my parents, I actually saved some money. I went to visit a psychiatrist to ask him if there was something wrong with me. He told me, "No, everything is fine, but I can still prescribe you some drugs." Great, thanks. I felt helpless. I didn't know what to do. So I had this great idea to go to India. I had read so much about all these mystical people living there, and I saw it as my chance for a miracle. I was sure I would find a healer who would miraculously cure me. So after 3 weeks in India, I arrived in the village of Sai Baba, one of the most famous healers back then. And as soon as I arrived, I became extremely sick from food poisoning. No surprise there. Well, I thought it would stop within a few days, but it didn't. After a week in a hospital under transfusion, I was transported by plane to the best hospital in New Delhi because there was a risk, again, that I could die. I remember lying in the hospital and my parents were calling me. I couldn't talk to them. I couldn't reassure my parents. I couldn't even hold a phone in my hand. I honestly thought this was the end. But the doctors managed to find and remove a rare bacteria, and life slowly returned to my body. This episode cost me having my first panic attacks. I felt that my belief in the power of magic was draining from my body. I was afraid to travel. I was even afraid of leaving my house for a while. I continued living with a huge amount of painkillers, trying to ignore all the symptoms. I stopped showing people how much I was suffering. I stopped dreaming. Because when you are ill, you have only one dream, and that is to be cured. But 4 years later, I saw a light on the end of the tunnel. A really good friend of mine, who is a doctor, was able to diagnose the disease I had been suffering from, and she connected me with the best specialist in France. It felt like a sucker punch when they finally told me that there was no cure for interstitial cystitis. I had a hyperdistinction of my bladder and was put on some tested medication along with daily antibiotics and painkillers for an unlimited time. Nothing had changed. Well, apart from the fact that this time I knew for sure I wasn't crazy. So I started to travel again and to search for other alternative methods, less woo-woo this time. And let me tell you, half of my luggage looked like a pharmacy. Traveling was not easy. So what happened next is I was in Laos with my partner, and I remember that day like it was yesterday, warm, shiny, quiet. I had just had this gorgeous massage. And then my partner decided to break up with me. Yeah. I came back to the room, and I saw him crying on the bed. He said he didn't love me anymore. I hated myself. I thought that no one will ever be able to love me. I was so terrified by a fear of being rejected, being alone. I had had enough of this life. This is the first time when I actually spoke to the universe. Well, you can call it speaking or screaming, depending on your definition. I shouted, "Fine, you took everything I care about. Now, my life is yours. Give me whatever you want to give me, and if I'm supposed to suffer like that for the rest of my life, well, so be it. I let go. I'm done with dreaming about a better tomorrow." And then, the strangest thing started to happen. Things started to change at the speed that I could not possibly imagine, and the various tools started to appear in my life. I ended up at a meditation retreat, and on the first day, I completely detached from my body. I was re-experiencing my body for the very first time. I started to perceive reality completely differently. I started to have dreams about what was going to happen the next day. I started to feel. And for the first time in my life, I actually felt love for myself. During this time, I experienced an instant healing. I didn't know how it happened, but I knew that my disease was gone forever. I haven't taken any medication since, apart from minerals and vitamins. I became fascinated by altered states of consciousness, as I wanted to understand what had happened to me and how could I replicate that experience, come back to that state. Last year, I started a documentary movie on enhanced states of consciousness in collaboration with Mind Valley. I interview experts from all around the world in the field of meditation, neuroscience, psychedelics, brain function, conscious technology, and personal growth. I wanted to understand everything about altered state. But what exactly is an example of an altered state? Well, have you ever been dancing for hours, completely lost in the music, forgetting about the entire world? Or have you been on a date with somebody you are absolutely crazy about and realized that the sun is already rising? This is one type of an altered state called flow. There are many more of these states that almost all of us had experienced at some point. We can access the state through psychology, pharmacology, technology, or neurobiology. While every of these states is experienced differently, they are all neurobiologically very similar. They all have an effect on our brainwaves. They all have 4 commonalities that Stephen Kotler and Jamie Will write about in their book Stealing Fire. And they all combine some of 4 most addictive and pleasurable neurochemicals that our brain can produce. In this society of consumption, it has become extremely popular to explore altered states. We have nice houses, fancy cars, kids attending great school, yet we still find ourselves asking, is this it? Is this it? It feels like something is still missing. So we begin looking for experiences and feelings to fulfill us. We want to change our current state. As a complete paradox, I realized that altered states bring you nowhere else than straight back to the present moment. We experience a time dilation. We are forced to be here and now. We escape the present moment to get ourselves back to the present moment. Interesting, right? So I thought to myself, maybe I was not actually trying to escape the present moment when I was sick. Maybe I was trying to escape a desperation to be somewhere else and to be someone else. I wanted to fast forward into the time when I was healthy. Through all this research, I realized something about living in the future. The very idea of it was robbing me from true self-love and happiness. Let me share with you why. Living in the future creates 3 feelings. First one is fear. Living in the future forces us to unnaturally create a feeling, a vision of how our future will look like. Those images can either be positive or negative, but in both cases they can imprison us. Even with positive thoughts, the more we desire something, the more we become afraid that we will not get it. Me, instead of creating dreams, I was creating worries. I was constantly afraid that I would never be healed, and that very fear was making my healing impossible. Most of our fear lives nowhere else but in the idea of the future. The second feeling is absence. When we desire to be somewhere else and to experience something else, we are actually create a feeling of absence. We create a deficiency, a sense of lack, a hunger, a deprivation. I meet so many people who practice meditation who are hungry for well-being. It's the same problem. You tell yourself you don't have yet well-being. We are constantly conditioned to believe that something better is in our future. Every single spiritual tool is a double-edged sword because it puts us in the frame of reference that we need to do something in order to get somewhere better. The third feeling we are creating is rejection. I thought my future would be easier and happier, but that only made the present moment more difficult and painful. Mikey Siegel, who is a great consciousness hacker, said, usually the part of us that is seeking is the part of us that is hurt. I was not rejecting the present moment. I was rejecting myself in that moment. And I realized it was this very rejection that created my sickness in the first place. You see, when I was little, I was rejected by my brother, who felt rejected by our parents and blamed me for it. I even didn't have his phone number for over 28 years. My heart disease appeared when he stopped beating me. That's when I took over and I started to beat myself up. My bladder disease appeared when I had my first romantic relationship. I was punishing myself for experiencing love. I didn't think I deserved it. I didn't even think that I deserved to be alive. That day back in Asia, I was able to heal myself the very moment I had no more desire to heal. The moment when I stopped rejecting my disease, and most of all, when I stopped rejecting myself. That's when the magic returned to me. That's when I experienced the miracle I was looking for. See, you can't heal something that you are rejecting. If you reject your own disease, you actually block your body from initiating the healing process. But it was not the disease that needed to be healed, but rather my perception of myself, my belief system. If you believe that there is something wrong with you, no tool will help you. Letting off of desire, even the desire to heal, is the most powerful gift you can give to yourself. Because this is when you start to accept and love yourself unconditionally. There is nothing in your experience, internal or external, that doesn't come from you. And you should never reject something that is yours. I realize that the most beneficial state of consciousness is not an ecstatic state, but a state of awareness, where you actually notice what is happening in the world around you and take it as it is, without an interpretation or grasping for something other or better. Awareness is not somewhere we go, but somewhere we stay. So how can you replicate my experience so that you can always be in the present moment? Well, first of all, set intention and let go of the outcome. If you get too attached to your own vision, you stop seeing other, potentially better opportunities in direction. I always thought I would be healed by someone else. Only when I let go of that idea, something much better happened. I was able to heal myself. Second, whenever you feel you start to think about the future too much, ask yourself, what am I avoiding about the present moment? How can I make this moment special? Even if you are in a place you don't want to be, make it unique. Start to write, create, read, make this moment a memory. And lastly, whenever you feel you are rejecting yourself, ask yourself, what if I will never be anything more that I am here and now? Could I be okay with it? Like me in Laos, being able to accept myself even with the disease? Yilong Tupten, a Buddhist monk, said, if you have a compassion for the parts of you that are hurt, resistance melts into joy. To put it simply, if you want to invest in your future, you need to invest in the now. Whoever you decide to be in this moment creates every moment of your future, because your future is nowhere else than here and now. Thank you.